For those of you who've yet to make weekend plans, perhaps a trip to local theatres to watch either a Korean comedy or a Hollywood blockbuster is an option, especially given the blistering summer heat outdoors. So what's playing at theatres this season? What's the response to the latest K-movie pilot? And what's streaming online at present? Hello, it's Friday, August 2nd here in South Korea, and you're watching Issues and Insiders. Today, we take a walk down the movie lane, if you will, for details on the productions that are gathering crowds. For this, I have Professor Jae Soh from Seoul Institute of the Arts. Professor Soh, it's been a while. Welcome back.
Nice to be back.
I also have film critic Jason Bechervaise with us. Jason, it's good to have you here.
Yeah, it's great to be here, as always.
Professor Soh, let's start off then with a few words about the big productions on the big screen this summer.
Well, it seems like Hollywood's kind of taken over the summer box office. Of course, Despicable Me, which opened last week, and then Deadpool and Wolverine. These are big things. But before that, there was also, Inside Out 2. That was a huge hit in Korea. But I think we had some pretty good Korean films that came out. There was Escape, about a North Korean, sort of South Korean, spy story that happens, a drama like that. And also, we had Hijack, a movie about a real story that happened where a Korean commercial airliner was hijacked by somebody and they wanted to go to North Korea. So those movies came out recently, and it didn't do as well as the Hollywood movies, of course, but I think if you want to compare it to last summer, I think this summer is having a better record only because, I was talking to Jason about that before, about how the budgets for a lot of these Korean local films have gotten lower. Last year we had some big budget movies, Smugglers, The Moon. These were well over $14, $15 million movies in terms of just the budget scale. But we had a lot of movies this year that basically was under $10 million in the budget. So basically, you wouldn't have that much of a hit if you don't, a financial loss if you don't have that much box office numbers. So I think they're doing respectably well. But of course, in the summer, it's always, we have the Marvel franchise coming in and a lot of animations coming out. So, it's a hard competition to do. Even, I would say, like Deadpool is kind of, being pushed aside by Despicable Me, which came out at the same time. So, movies in the summer, it's a real grab for people to come in. And fortunately, what I noticed when I went to the movie theaters recently is just that people are coming to the theaters, and in large part due to the hot weather. Of course, good air conditioning, you get a soda or beer, get to watch the movie. So in that sense, it's a good sign, and I think we're kind of piggybacking off everybody watching these big Hollywood movies, sort of like taking over the box office.
Right. And going back to Korean productions, Jason, do tell us a bit about the response that the Korean comedy film Pilot is securing in recent days.
Yeah, well, I went to see Pilot on its first day. It stars Cho Jung-seok, of course. It was really interesting being in a screen. Just kind of echoing Professor Soh's comments. There's a lot of interest in the film. There was excitement. There was lots of laughter in the screen. And so, it's a film. Cho Jung-seok plays this pilot, and he gets into trouble when there's a recording that's leaked after a kind of drunken exchange one night. And so he basically loses his job. He's blacklisted from the industry. And then, he works out that if he becomes a woman, his sister, and then applies for a position at one of the airlines, he can then be a pilot again. So that's what he does. And then he saves the day, and he prevents a disaster, so he becomes famous again. But how long can he maintain this act, right? So that's the story. It's generated some interesting discussions online because he's playing this interesting character as a male pretending to be a female, and so it does kind of delve into issues of gender, and so I think some have criticized the film for particularly some of the way male characters are depicted as sexist, but it also, I mean, I actually quite liked the way it does tackle some of these issues of gender and the issues facing women in the workplace, and there's certainly references to that. So, and it does it in a really kind of comical way, so you're kind of laughing at it and you realize that, you know, it's portraying society in a somewhat kind of satirical manner, and I think it does it within the kind of the commercial template. So even though it is delving into some of these difficulties, these issues facing society and Korean society, it does so that, you know, with a great sense of humor, and as a result, you know, audiences are enjoying it. I mean, it is quite predictable. I don't think it goes into these issues as deep as I would like it personally, but I do understand that this is a commercial film. It's released literally at the end of July. This is peak summer season, which is, you know, last week of July, first week of August. And so you want to have a film out there that audiences are finding, you know, entertaining, enjoyable. And that's what they seem to be doing. And it sold over 300,000 tickets on its opening day. Which I think is, you know, it's really, really great. And it did 200,000 admissions yesterday. It needs around about over 2 million admissions to break even. If it does so, and I think it's looking likely that it will do, given that it's, you know, is generating some interesting word of mouth, and, you know, it's got, you know, the summer season to help it get there. That would be 3 films that have broken even this summer. So that's Handsome Guys, it's Escape, and this film, if it manages to break even, which is a lot more than last summer, which was just which was Smugglers. So I think the industry is moving in an interesting direction. It was also directed by Kim Han-gyul, who's a female director, and if this will be a second hit. And so that's something to celebrate.
Right, indeed. Meanwhile, Professor, so going back to the Hollywood blockbuster Deadpool and Wolverine, the response to that particular production here on the local front appears to be quite mixed. How do you explain this phenomenon?
Well, worldwide, it's doing really well. I think as of today, it's like 500 million globally. So I think I went to see it, and what I noticed was, first of all, it's an R-rated movie. So basically in Korea, it's if you're under 18 or something, you can't even see it. I tried to go with my teenage sons, and they wanted to see it because they're big Marvel fans, but it was just all adults in there. So I went to a packed theater, and what I found was that if you're a big Marvel fan, either in the comics or the MCU, this is the movie for you because it just brings back, there are all these Easter eggs, everything's in it. And I happened to be in Yongsan CGV with a bunch of hipster young people. So they were laughing, and I was shocked because a lot of times I'm the only one laughing a lot of times at the jokes. But you know, it seemed like the atmosphere of the people they were into it. But again, if it was more of a regular movie, which is like PG-13 or something like that, I think they would have really done well in Korea. But of course, you know, because it's R-rated, you know, you just start to like really make the audience smaller in a sense. But I personally like the storytelling of it. This is the 3rd installment of the Deadpool series, and you know, Ryan Reynolds is a big producer. He's also a credited screenwriter in it, but he really managed to bring back Wolverine, who was actually with the movie Logan had retired, with Hugh Jackman saying that he's not going to do it again. But they came back, of course. And I think that chemistry between the two of them is really great. And as a sort of a Marvel fan, secret nerd, Wolverine has been one of my favorite characters. So it's great for me because he has a yellow suit. That's the original suit the Wolverine character was in. So everybody was nervous about that happening. But I think something like somebody on the set was like somebody older, started crying during the movie making of that because he was a Wolverine fan too. So it just kind of, if you get it like that, it is. But I can see in Korea, you know, I think it's like 1.4 million in the box office. For a Marvel movie, that's very small. But again, it's a R-rated movie, so it's mostly adults going to see it. I think if kids had come in, it would have been a bigger box office smash here. But again, I think it's a movie for the fans.
Right. And staying with Marvel, Jason, I understand that Robert Downey Jr., he's returning in a new Avengers movie. Tell us a bit more about this particular return and its implications.
Yeah, apparently so. So there's a few films that he's going to star in, and it's a bit unclear, like what kind of role he will have. But it's apparently the villain Doctor Doom. So yeah, he'll star in, I think, 3 films, including Avengers, Doomsday, and Secret Wars. And so it's hard to keep up with Marvel and the movies that they're producing. And I think they certainly have hit. I think they hit their peak around Endgame and Infinity War a few years ago. That's where it kind of they had those massive blockbuster films that were hugely successful, kind of really raising the bar in terms of the blockbuster template. But since then, I think we've seen a decline. Everything has the ups and downs, and you can never consistently remain at the top. And that's true for Marvel. Although I actually have been quite surprised with the success of Wolverine and Deadpool, and it's generated $590 million at the box office. So clearly, it does still have an appeal. But I think the fact that they are bringing Robert Downey Jr. back does suggest, I think, that he is definitely a big part of the franchise and its success. And I think they're going to pay him in the region of around $80 million. So that's big money. And even for Robert Downey Jr., I mean, he's not the box office draw that he is, when he's Iron Man, right? So when he's Iron Man, he is like, one of the most popular, most recognizable, movie stars in the world. But when he plays something else, he doesn't quite have that pull. So I think for him it works because he can go back into the Marvel universe. And that's the thing with Hollywood. Even though you're dead, right, or there's a way of bringing you back from the dead. Which is what happens in Deadpool Wolverine. So they always find a way, and so clearly that's what they're doing.
Right, like you were saying, like different mask, same task.
Yes.
All right, Professor, so let's move on to the smaller screen, if you will. OTT platforms, they're also reaching out to their fans. Korea's Sweet Home Season 3, I understand, is ranking quite high on Netflix. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, Sweet Home came out in 2020, and it was based on a neighbor webtoon series that was a huge hit. And it's about monsters and survival. I think the first season was amazing. I really like the characters in it, and it had Song Kang and Lee Si-young, a lot of actors that are kind of young and coming up. So I really enjoyed watching that. But the second season, personally, as a fan, I think a lot of people were kind of disappointed. And so it's almost like a letdown because you made such a great first season. And the second season kind of went off in a weird sort of direction, even though it was following the webtoon. So I think they are making this season much closer to the first one. So going back to the original sort of, surviving mode, fighting all the monsters and things like that. So, those are kind of like the characteristics of the show. But I personally like other shows on Netflix, like, for example, The Good Partner, which just is doing pretty well. It's Jang Nara as a lawyer, and Korea is very famous for law, and also it kind of focuses on divorce. So the main character is a divorced lawyer, and then she finds herself in a situation where her marriage is on the rocks. So I kind of find that sort of you could have the monsters and all this like dystopian stuff happening, but I really like the dramas that are kind of, I think, closer to what K-dramas are really about, which is basically family, about betrayal, loyalty, themes that we've seen more traditionally. So I think we're going to talk about it a little later, but I think the K-drama landscape is definitely changing, and it's interesting what's happening.
Right. Jason, Pachinko Season 2, it's also going to be showing on Apple TV Plus later this month. What can we expect there?
It drops on the Apple streaming service on August 23rd. This is the series that's based on Min Jin Lee's acclaimed novel Pachinko. It's a fantastic novel. I read it myself. And so, this is the season 2. It picks up in Osaka in 1948. It basically follows 4 generations of a Korean family that moved to Japan, and so it's structured slightly differently compared to the book. So I really like the first season. I think the production design is just truly incredible, and the acting's fantastic. And it's just a riveting drama, and it obviously delves into history, a very tumultuous, well, not just tumultuous periods rather than just one particular period. So I'm very curious to see what happens in the second season. I mean, the first season generated a lot of buzz in particularly the United States, where it was very, very well received. And accumulating, it received a lot of awards, including the Independent Spirits Award for Best Ensemble Cast. So yeah, it could enter the awards race, assuming it's as good as the first season. And so yeah, there is a high bar that it needs to meet to try and continue to generate that interest. But yeah, I have high hopes. The material there is excellent. The novel, and it's got a great team of writers behind it, and I'm sure it'll look fantastic. So very, very keen to see that indeed.
Right, looking forward to that as well, me too. Professor, shamanism, it's emerging as a rather popular topic for entertainment shows and OTT platforms. What do you believe is perhaps fueling this popularity?
Well, personally, I think shamanism already an interesting kind of topic, but I think Exuma came out this year, and it really kind of changed the landscape, because it was I think it's 13 million people went to see that movie in Korea alone. So, and it's a big hit in other countries. And, the occult is definitely a big genre in movies, but most of the occult that we've seen that are popular really have to do with Christian, Judeo sort of backgrounds. But I think people are starting to really be fascinated by other cultures and sort of their religious backgrounds and histories. And I think Korean shamanism is definitely deeply rooted in our society even today. And there's and TVing, I think the OTT platform, local one, they have a series called Shaman, The Whispers of the Dead. And in that one, it's an 8-part series, a documentary. And I didn't know this, when I talked to people at Netflix, Korea is one of the biggest watchers of documentaries in Asia. And so we have a big audience for that. And this series is doing really well. It's an 8-part series. And basically it delves into how even people that are Christian, maybe of Catholic faith, they still rely on shamanism to set dates for births, marriages, weddings. There's also, we call it pungsujiri in Korean, and I guess in the West it's really known as feng shui, which is basically when you move into a place, you have to set the furniture a certain direction. You know what I mean? It basically about sort of, that has a kind of shamanistic roots of that sort. So I think our society, even though I think right now, Korea is very known for its technology, we have the Korean wave and all this, but I think it's still a confusing world out there. And religion is good because it kind of stabilizes the family and the person. But I think, if you're doing business and you're really worried about stuff, basically what do you rely on? You go to a shaman priest to see what your fortunes say. What are the tea leaves are saying from the West, I guess, would be the equivalent. But I think what's interesting about that is I remember the movie Memories of Murder, Bong Joon-ho's film. There's a scene where the detectives, they can't find this murderer, so they go see a fortune teller, and the fortune teller is, the murder's over there. There's this kind of, I think it's a last resort, and also something that traditionally has happened historically with Koreans kind of relying on that. So I think, it's really deep rooted. I think even in politics, politicians go see fortune tellers, and shamanism is deeply rooted in our society, even though it's a modern society with a lot of, religions that we already know, but I think people still rely on that. So I think it's a fascination, I think, starting to become more of a genre that people are exploring in movies and in series, and I think Exuma definitely made the big wave this year with that topic.
Right, and staying with genre, Professor, so before we end today, I'd like to touch upon something you mentioned earlier. You did talk about how Korean screen productions are moving away from the family-friendly fads to include perhaps more graphic Hollywood-style productions. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think this big change personally has to do with the fact that before, I think dramas were made primarily by the networks or production companies had to do with television. And now television is sort of now declining, and it's all streaming. So once the streaming business really started in Korea, I think you suddenly have a lot more productions going on. So you have the successes of the regular, as I was talking about, family-oriented, about loyalty. You have dramas really about, so the rich or the poor, all the traditional stuff. But then suddenly there was Squid Game, which came out during COVID, and when everybody was home and the whole world watched it. And they're seeing commercially that that's the direction that you're going. So I don't know if it's really going to the Hollywood route, but I do feel like what's happening is also the influx of film directors that used to just stay in the lane of movies, but they're all doing episodic television streaming. So they're bringing their darkness and angst and everything Korean cinema is about, which is, Korean cinema is not exactly, bright and rosy. We teach that, Jason and I, at different universities. We're always talking about like revenge and rebellion and all that stuff. So I think that combined with the fact that I think, audiences are now, they need to be sort of, kind of coaxed into watch something. And I think, the sweet sort of innocent story about, the somebody that comes from behind the wind isn't enough now. You need something much more violent. Maybe it has to be something where, there's a bad guy or evil thing happening. So I think society is like really wanting that. And I think producers are recognizing that commercial factor in that. And so I think that's sort of my take on it. Other people might disagree, but I think combination of people from the movie industry coming into the streaming service and then those things doing well. I mean, Squid Game was directed by a film director. He's not a drama director,
Right.
so, and that's like the biggest moneymaker ever in the world. So I think those are things that really kind of changed the landscape of K-dramas.
Right, and speaking about Squid Game, I understand season 2 is coming out later this year in December 26th. All right, Professor Soh, as always, thank you so much for your insights. And Jason, as always, thank you very much for your thoughts
thank
today.
you for having me. Thank you for having me.
Right, well, on that note, we end this week's editions of Issues and Insiders. Thank you for watching.